After years of powerful Pixel phones, 2020 saw a sidestep from Google. The Pixel 5 shipped with mid-range specifications and not necessarily best in the best hardware, and helped pave the way for that big tensor overhaul a year later for the Google smartphone series. 4 years ago, Google dropping the flagship tier specifications in favour of what we'd consider a mid-ranger seemed absolutely unthinkable, but it offered further refined software experiences and seemed like an alien concept, at least from the outset. So why or how did it work? This is our Pixel 5 postmortem. If you like this type of Google and Android focused content, then go on, hit subscribe. We're building the biggest community of like-minded Android fans, and you'll be very welcome. But back to the video. So for Google to throw out the fundamentals of Pixel phones seemed pretty absurd from the outset. Google has always offered the best of what Android could offer and the software stack to back it up. Except this time, the Mountain View tech giant really didn't. The standard and XL dynamic was also ditched with the 2020 flagship model. If you wanted the Pixel 5 with any extra bells and whistles, it was in one flavour, but at least it did offer 5G connectivity for the first time. The growth of 5G networks from late 2019 to today has been fairly slow, all things considered, compared to previous 4G and LTE technology. The cost of adding 5G capable chips, at least to a smartphone back in 2019 and 2020, was extremely high. So Qualcomm's Snapdragon 765G was one of the first mid-range processors to aid smartphone makers in offering super fast connectivity alongside modest processing might under the hood. Google decided that the 765G was the perfect chip for its upcoming flagship. The upside? It had a lower asking price, and at £599 in the UK or £699 in the US, it offered a lot compared to the competition. It was still a little bit steep considering that at its heart, the Pixel 5 was a mid-ranger though, and Google's one-size-fits-all approach means that there's no XL version of the Pixel 5, at least as far as we're aware, and the result is the smallest mainline Pixel today. It's unlike any other Google Pixel phone in the entire lineup, past or present. It's fairly small at 6 inches, every corner is rounded, and that unibody chassis is soft to the touch. My biggest gripe way back at launch was that it only came in 2 colour variants, black and green. That said, the Sorta Sage model is super classy, it's aged really well with that accented metal power button, adding a little bit of extra class. I think that this is the least Pixel-like Pixel to date, and what I mean by that is that it has some familiar traits, and with the benefit of hindsight, feels more akin to the A series than its predecessor and the Pixel 6 series that followed it. I used the Pixel 5 daily for the better part of a year when it was released, and the size is instantly attractive even when I come back to it today. Only the Pixel 4a and the Pixel 8 are really comparable. You can use it one-handed with a lot of comfort. The rear fingerprint scanner is perfectly placed, and the chassis itself is super slimline. Whether it was intended or not, I think the Pixel 5 mixed these ingredients, and the result is more or less the perfect form factor for fans of small phones. There's absolutely no compromise on the materials here as well, which I really do like that Google managed to do. I like how sturdy and well packed the aluminium chassis feels compared to other phones of the era, which, at least when I go back to them, often creak and flex with that slightest bit of pressure, even though they may have cost twice as much. I found this to be a benefit twofold. Firstly, I could use the phone without a case if I wanted, as that bioresin finish added a rough paper-like grip quality, and I know that a drop probably won't spell disaster because there's no back glass to smash or scratch or worry about. The frame definitely hides a little secret here too that you might not be aware of. Ordinarily, most aluminium unibody designs are unable to use traditional induction-based wireless charging. Google engineers, though, cut out a small hole in the rear frame right where that wireless charging coil sits, and because bioresin is thin enough to allow a current to pass through while remaining rigid or firm, the Pixel 5 is able to use devices like the Pixel Stand and other wireless chargers at up to 10 watts while keeping that package super thin. Another solid design choice was to shoehorn in a sizable 4080 mAh internal cell to what is a really small form factor. The Pixel 4 series had some horrendous battery issues the year before, and while the Pixel 5 was no powerhouse in terms of lifespan, it fixed the problem of midday charges for most people, myself included. Going to the front of this device, and I will say the OLED is almost perfect, and I say almost with a heavy heart as it doesn't get very bright, and the upper left punch hole definitely now seems in an odd position given that we've all gone for central punch holes. However, the bezels are identical on all sides, which looks gorgeous in person. The screen is completely flat and it is tuned to perfection. There's absolutely no green tinting issues, which plagued some Pixel 6 series devices, and it's just a great example of what Google can do, that is, to tune their displays. So while I wax lyrical about this display all day, I can't really say the same about that dreadful under-display earpiece speaker. I'm absolutely glad that this didn't take hold in the industry, and the Pixel series has ordinarily had fairly good sound out of it, but I cannot say that is the case with the Pixel 5 series. It was pretty awful at launch, and it's even more awful today, especially as it doesn't carry much sound around a wide space of that display. It's a shame as well that the excellent Face Unlock was ditched, but this was the swan song for what I would consider one of the most excellent rear fingerprint scanners. Returning to a physical scanner highlights just how poor Google has really implemented their in-display scanner on the newer devices. We've lost utility as well. Swiping on this fingerprint scanner invokes the quick settings panel, and it is a feature I really do miss quite dearly, and I'd love to see it return somehow or someday on a future Pixel phone. The Pixel 5 has also seen some of the biggest changes in terms of the day-to-day experience in both performance and the Android look and feel, and despite shipping with Android 11, when Android 12 arrived it felt ready-made for this hardware, and so for me the Pixel 5 only really felt right when that OTA did drop. Android 11 just felt like a stopgap for better or worse, and when Android 12 arrived I felt like this device was made a little bit more complete, and the reason is rounded corners reign supreme in that post Android 12 area, and with its bubbly aesthetic, Android 14 and other updates that rely on Material U and all of those changes just feel like they're made for this device. It's the last update though that this hardware will ever receive, but I think it's a fitting final flourish for the Pixel 5. You might eke out a few more years with ROMs like the Lineage OS, which I have recently reviewed, if you're dead set on sticking with this form factor and this particularly small Pixel phone. That aside, the Snapdragon 765G is in a bit of an odd position because while it includes 5G connectivity, the Pixel 4 and 4 XL are actually more powerful despite being a year older and lacking that super fast data connection speed. The base RAM configuration though is a little higher at 8GB, which I think is helpful for multitasking now that the Pixel 5 is getting a little bit long in the tooth and lacks the grunt of more recent phones and even some mid-rangers. For the majority of its lifespan, I can't say I had many complaints over the Pixel 5 with general usage. It is though starting to show its age a little bit here and there, and I will say that is most prominent because of the older and slower UFS 2.1 storage. It just means for me that apps take a little bit longer to load when compared to some other 2020 devices. The only downside is that with mid-range specs, the Pixel 5 hasn't necessarily aged as well as its older sibling, the Pixel 4, despite being a year newer and supported for a year more on top of that Pixel 4. A problem that still persists though, but to a lesser extent, is that Google hasn't always been the fastest at adding common functions and features to the Pixel series. This was quite apparent when the Pixel 5 launched. It was actually the first to ship with features like extreme battery saver and hold for me, alongside lots of Android 11 firsts like an inbuilt screen recorder, resizable picture-in-picture windows, enhanced app permissions, which has been a core feature of Android since then, the power menu wallet UI, plus more on top of that. There's tons of things that this phone added or arrived with that weren't commonplace on Pixel phones before that, and lots of these were huge at the time and definitely seem inconsequential with the passage of time and of course future Android updates. We definitely had high hopes for the Pixel 5 when it launched in terms of its camera capabilities, and as a personal fan of telephoto lenses over wide angles, I was actually sorely disappointed when the Pixel 5 launched, at least that it only came with a wide angle and a main lens. Sure, I will say that main 12 megapixel lens is absolutely fine, it just about hangs in there in 2024. The utility though of an ultra wide is practically lost on me because I just love to zoom in and uncover details, and I think that also lets newer Pixel devices down having that combo. Even at the time though, the Sony IMX363 felt a little bit long in the tooth and it was starting to get a little bit old. As I said, it still produces fine images, but it's a relic of a different era for Google's smartphone camera efforts. We're on to bigger, better and high resolution things now, and I think general point and shoot photography is definitely on the edge of good enough with the Pixel 5, and that's probably down to the tuning rather than the actual quality of the sensor on offer. Like any smartphone camera though, it's how you use it which counts. It might lack them in terms of megapixels, but it makes up for in character and that pixely charm. Once you see it, You either fall in love with it or you hate it. And I must admit, for me, I always keep coming back to it. And I personally prefer the Pixel 4 lens selection, but the Pixel 5 is still capable of taking photos you would be proud of. Looking back through some of my favorite images taken with this device, I will say they lack a little sharpness throughout every frame section. Things can look a little bit soft towards the edges, but that is to be expected given that low resolution. And of course, when using that wide angle, it's a little bit more pronounced. In recent years though, video has become a bigger focus for the Pixel series. The Pixel 5 did add a few neat little tricks like cinematic pan, locked focus, and an active mode. All of these are predominantly software powered, and the best of the bunch for me was always that locked focus mode. On top of that, 4K 60f video was added for the first time on this phone. Luckily, Android 11 also removed that annoying 4GB limit for video recordings, so the Pixel 5 was perfectly placed to take advantage of that. I still think that even in 2024, no Pixel has really done video justice, and even though new features have arrived to the latest cohort, the Pixel 5 was still pretty lacking in 2024. It's more pronounced now though at any other stage, and when I look back at video I've shot with the Pixel 5, I'm always a little bit thinking this could have been a lot better. So to summarize this entire look back of the Pixel 5, I think of this as Google's fallow year before the big birth of Tensor with the Pixel 6 series. This device kind of tempered our expectations and proved that not everyone needs to have the best internals to offer what we consider a premium Pixel experience, and you could argue that the A series did that even before the Pixel 5 arrived. What's apparent is just though how much has changed since the Pixel 5 hit shelves. This was just a good phone, nothing more, nothing less, and I think Google definitely achieved that. The only downside though is that it was never really a market leading phone that many seemingly expect from Google to offer year in, year out. My colleague Carl Bradshaw calls this Google's most pragmatic phone to date, and I actually agree wholeheartedly. It likely proved to many people that you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles to get a flagship experience, especially if you hadn't tried the A series. To summarise from my own perspective, I'll steal another quote, this time from someone you might not know, and that's football manager Nigel Adkins. I think this phone is doing what he would consider the basics to an elite level, which is a convoluted way to say that the Pixel 5 definitely prepared us for what the Pixel 6 would bring to the table a year later. Competency at its core, without too many compromises for its intended audience. And that has really been carried over to that Tensor-powered smartphone series. Maybe Google's internally developed chips will eventually compete with the best, but the Pixel 5 was the first to hint that potentially raw power isn't the end goal of a Google smartphone. Do you agree with me? Let me know what you think of the Pixel 5 down in the comment sections below. But until next time, this is Damien saying thanks for watching this look back at an older Pixel device, and I will speak to you later.